Chosen one, listen carefully. This is not random, and it's not a coincidence that you're watching this today. A private investigator was brought in to track you, your silence, your movements, your sudden shift. They expected to find weakness, confusion, or proof that you were falling behind. But what they uncovered shocked them completely. Instead of failure, they found discipline. Instead of chaos, they saw protection. Your quiet seasons weren't losses, they were preparation. And now, the truth they discovered is starting to surface. Before this message goes deeper, connect with this moment. Like this video, comment, "Thank you God for choosing me," and subscribe to the channel, because what's about to be revealed will explain why certain people feel exposed and why your life is entering a powerful new phase. They started watching you when you went silent. The moment you went silent, everything changed. Before that, people were used to you explaining yourself. You explained your feelings. You explained your intentions. You even explained your pain. But when you stopped doing that, it caught their attention. Your silence didn't look normal to them because they were used to having access to your thoughts and emotions. When that access ended, curiosity started growing. They began wondering what was going on in your life and why you were suddenly so calm. Earlier, they could predict you. They knew how you would react. They knew what would trigger you. They knew when you would respond and when you would defend yourself. But once you stopped reacting, their control disappeared. That's when silence started to feel threatening to them. Your quiet nature wasn't weakness, it was unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things make insecure people uncomfortable. They assumed silence meant something was wrong. They thought maybe you were struggling, maybe you were hurt, maybe you were falling apart behind closed doors. But the truth was the opposite. You weren't silent because you were broken. You were silent because you were tired of wasting energy on people who never truly listened. You chose peace over explanation, and that decision confused them deeply. As time passed, they noticed something else. You didn't look affected anymore. You weren't emotional. You weren't defensive. You weren't trying to clear misunderstandings. You simply moved forward. That's when curiosity turned into suspicion. They wanted to know what changed inside you. Why did your energy feel different? Why did you suddenly look so focused and grounded? Your silence made them imagine stories. Some thought you were planning something. Some thought you had secret support. Some felt exposed, because silence reflects truth back to people. When you stopped talking, they were forced to sit with their own thoughts, and many didn't like what they saw. What they never understood is that silence can be powerful. It can be a sign of growth. You were healing parts of yourself that didn't need an audience. You were learning how to protect your energy. You were rebuilding your life quietly, step by step, without announcing it to the world. While they assumed nothing was happening, everything was happening. Your silence wasn't empty. It was full of self-respect. It was full of clarity. It was full of inner work that doesn't show on the surface immediately. And that's why it bothered them, because people who are still loud on the outside often haven't done the quiet work on the inside. By choosing silence, you took your power back. You stopped feeding confusion. You stopped explaining your worth. And in doing so, you unknowingly made people watch you more closely. Because when a chosen one goes silent, it usually means transformation is happening. They expected to find you struggling. When they decided to look into your life, they were confident about one thing. They thought you were struggling. In their mind, all the pressure you went through had to leave damage. They expected to see exhaustion, confusion, or signs that you were barely holding on. They believed the weight of everything you faced would eventually slow you down or make you give up. That assumption gave them comfort because it meant you were no different from anyone else. But what they actually found didn't match their expectations at all. Instead of chaos, they found structure. Instead of disorder, they saw routines. Your days had purpose. Your actions showed intention. You were waking up with discipline, handling responsibilities quietly, and making steady choices even when no one was watching. That discovery surprised them because they thought pain always leads to weakness. They didn't expect pain to create strength. They noticed that you weren't constantly sharing your progress. There were no loud announcements, no dramatic posts, no need for validation. Yet when they looked closely, it was clear that progress was happening daily. Small improvements were stacking up. Habits were forming. Boundaries were being respected. You were building something real without drawing attention to it, and that unsettled them. What shocked them the most was your self-control. You didn't rush decisions. You didn't react emotionally. You didn't chase distractions to escape discomfort. Instead, you stayed grounded. You focused on what mattered. That level of control doesn't come from comfort. It comes from surviving difficult seasons and learning from them. They expected you to be broken by pressure, but pressure had trained you. They began to realize that while they thought you were falling apart, you were actually adapting. You learned how to move smarter, not harder. You learned which battles to ignore and which ones required patience. You adjusted your mindset instead of complaining about your circumstances. And that kind of adjustment is powerful because it lasts. The fear didn't start when they saw your past. It started when they saw your present. They realized you weren't frozen by stress. You weren't stuck in the same place. You were quietly becoming someone stronger than before. That's when the balance shifted. The people who once felt above you began to feel uncertain because you no longer fit the image they had created in their minds. What scared them wasn't your struggle, it was your stability. You didn't collapse under pressure. You didn't disappear. You transformed. And once they understood that pressure didn't destroy you, but shaped you, they knew something had changed. The strength they expected to be gone was stronger than ever, and now it wasn't on their side anymore. Your quiet life revealed inner strength. When they looked closely at your life, they didn't find chaos or drama. What they found instead was peace. Your days weren't loud or flashy, but they were steady. There was no rush to prove anything, no need to impress anyone, and no constant search for approval. That quiet stability stood out more than noise ever could. It made them pause, because peace is not something you can fake. It's earned. They noticed you weren't constantly seeking attention. You didn't need people to clap for you to keep going. You weren't sharing every detail of your life or explaining your choices. You moved at your own pace, comfortable with not being seen. That kind of confidence is unsettling to people who depend on external validation to feel secure. Your calmness made them uncomfortable because it showed them something they didn't have. They realized something important. You had learned how to stand on your own. You didn't fall apart when no one was around. You didn't need constant reassurance. You could sit with your thoughts, face your reality, and still remain steady. That ability is rare. Many people crumble when they are alone because silence forces them to confront themselves. You didn't run from silence. You used it. Your life showed signs of emotional balance. You weren't reacting to every situation. You chose when to speak and when to stay quiet. You protected your energy without explaining why. That level of control only comes from inner strength. It showed that you trusted yourself enough to move without approval, and that trust was built through experience, not comfort. They also noticed how grounded you were. You weren't jumping from one thing to another. You weren't chasing trends or comparing your path to others. You were focused on what mattered to you. That focus created stability, and stability created peace. While others were loud and scattered, you were calm and centered. Most people need noise to distract themselves from what they feel inside. They fill their time with attention, opinions, and drama to avoid sitting with their own thoughts. You did the opposite. You learned how to function without distraction. You found strength in stillness. You learned how to grow without an audience. That's when it became clear. You weren't just surviving. Survival is about getting through the day. What you were doing was deeper than that. You were evolving. You were becoming emotionally stronger, mentally clearer, and spiritually more aware. Your quiet life wasn't empty. It was full of growth that didn't need to be announced. What they discovered wasn't weakness, hidden behind silence. It was strength, wrapped in calm. And once they understood that, they knew you were no longer on the same level as before. You had outgrown the need for noise, and that meant you had stepped into a different kind of power, one that speaks without saying a word. They discovered you were protected, not lucky. What shocked them the most was not what you achieved, but what failed to destroy you. When they reviewed your journey, they noticed moments that would have broken most people. Situations where others lose hope, lose themselves, or completely give up. Yet somehow, you walked through those moments and came out standing, not untouched, but intact. That's when questions started forming, because survival alone couldn't explain it. They noticed how timing worked in your life. Things you wanted badly didn't happen when you expected them to. At the time, it felt frustrating. But later, it became clear those delays saved you from paths that would have drained you or trapped you. What once felt like being held back was actually you being held safe. Delays weren't punishment. They were protection. They also paid attention to the doors that closed on you. Rejections that once felt personal now looked purposeful. Jobs you didn't get, relationships that ended, opportunities that disappeared. Each one pushed you away from something that wasn't aligned with your growth. While others saw loss, the pattern showed redirection. Your life wasn't being reduced, it was being rearranged. Losses played a different role in your story as well. Instead of leaving you bitter or defeated, they refined you. You became more aware of what truly mattered. You learned what you could live without and what deserved your energy. Pain sharpened your judgment instead of hardening your heart. That kind of response doesn't come from chance. It comes from guidance. From the outside, it was easy for people to label your survival as luck. Luck is simple and comfortable to believe in. It avoids deeper questions. But when they looked closer, luck didn't explain the consistency. It didn't explain how danger seemed to miss you, how harm never had the final word, or how you kept landing on your feet after every fall. They began to see a pattern of guarding. You were often removed from situations just before they collapsed. You were warned through intuition before things went wrong. You felt uneasy in places that later proved unsafe. Those details couldn't be ignored. You weren't escaping by accident. You were being led. Once they saw this, it changed how they viewed your entire journey. Your life wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was being overseen. Every close call, every narrow escape, every unexpected turn pointed to protection, working quietly in the background. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. That's when they understood. You weren't lucky. You were covered. You were protected in ways that didn't always feel good in the moment, but always made sense later. And once that realization settled in, they could no longer deny it. Your survival wasn't a coincidence. It was evidence. Your past pain was actually proof of preparation. They believed your past would explain why you failed. They thought your history of pain would point to weakness, mistakes, or emotional damage. In their mind, everything you went through was supposed to slow you down or leave you stuck. But when they actually looked at your past, they saw something completely different. Instead of collapse, they saw construction. Your struggles didn't destroy you. They shaped you. Every betrayal you experienced taught you discernment. You learned how to recognize intentions instead of just words. You stopped trusting blindly and started trusting wisely. That awareness didn't make you cold. It made you careful. You learned the value of boundaries, not because someone told you, but because life taught you the cost of having none. Setbacks played a role too. Times when things didn't work out forced you to adapt. You learned patience. You learned flexibility. You learned how to rebuild without blaming the world. While others complained about unfairness, you adjusted your approach. That ability to adapt became one of your strongest qualities, even if no one noticed it at the time. Disappointments taught you emotional control. You felt the pain fully, but you didn't let it control your future decisions. Instead of becoming bitter, you became observant. You started noticing patterns, what drained you, what lifted you, and what wasn't meant to stay. You learned that not everything lost is meant to be recovered. Some things leave to make room for better alignment. What surprised them most was how your pain translated into wisdom. You didn't rush anymore. You didn't react impulsively. You thought before you acted. You listened more than you spoke. That kind of calm judgment doesn't come from comfort. It comes from experience. Your past taught you how to move with intention instead of emotion. They also noticed your empathy. Even after everything, you didn't lose your ability to understand others. You became more compassionate without being naive. You could relate to pain without letting it define you. That balance is rare. Many people either harden completely or stay overly open. You found the middle ground. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. Your past was preparation. Each painful chapter strengthened a different part of you. Emotional endurance, mental clarity, and inner discipline were built slowly, not instantly. While others were busy racing forward, you were being equipped internally. That's when the realization hit. You weren't behind in life. You weren't late. You weren't falling short. You were ahead in understanding. You had already learned lessons others would face much later. Your pain didn't damage your future. It prepared you for it. And once that truth became clear, your past stopped looking like a disadvantage and started looking like proof that you were being shaped for something greater. Your boundaries exposed who was threatened. One of the most revealing discoveries was the impact your boundaries had on the people around you. The moment you stopped overgiving, things shifted. You were no longer available at every call, no longer saying yes when it drained you, and no longer sacrificing your peace to keep others comfortable. That change alone exposed more than any argument ever could. When you started protecting your time and energy, certain people reacted strongly, not because you did something wrong, but because they lost access. They were used to you being reachable, flexible, and emotionally available whenever they needed something. When that access ended, panic set in. The investigator noticed a clear pattern. Those who benefited most from your lack of boundaries were the ones who reacted the worst. Instead of supporting your growth, some people became uncomfortable. They questioned your behavior. They tried to guilt you. They framed your boundaries as selfishness. But the truth was simple. Your boundaries disrupted a system that worked in their favor. You were no longer playing the role they assigned you, and that loss of control unsettled them. What stood out was how your boundaries were calm, not aggressive. You didn't argue. You didn't explain yourself repeatedly. You just changed your behavior. That quiet shift made it impossible for people to manipulate you the way they used to. And when manipulation fails, it often turns into frustration or resentment. That reaction wasn't about you. It was about what they were losing. The investigation also revealed something deeper. The people who truly cared about you adjusted. They respected your space. They didn't pressure you or make you feel guilty. Meanwhile, those who felt threatened tried to pull you back into old patterns. This contrast made everything clear. Your boundaries acted like a filter, showing who valued you and who only valued what you provided. They also noticed how boundaries strengthened you. You became more focused. You had more energy. You made better decisions. Protecting yourself didn't isolate you. It aligned you. You weren't cutting people off emotionally. You were choosing healthier connections. That kind of self-respect changes how you move through life. What shocked them most was how revealing your boundaries were. Without saying a word, they exposed who depended on your overgiving, who needed you exhausted to feel comfortable, and who felt insecure when you became balanced. Your boundaries told a story your silence never had to explain. The realization was undeniable. Your old version benefited others more than it benefited you. The new version protects you first. And that shift made some people uneasy because it reminded them they could no longer control, use, or underestimate you. Your boundaries didn't push people away. They revealed the truth about who they really were. Your energy shifted from explaining to becoming. There was a time when you explained everything. You explained your intentions so people wouldn't misunderstand you. You explained your feelings so others would know you cared. You explained your vision because you wanted support and understanding. Back then, you believed clarity would protect you. But over time, you learned that explanations don't always bring respect. They often invite judgment. At some point, something changed. You stopped talking as much and started moving differently. You didn't announce plans. You didn't seek approval. You made decisions quietly and followed through without needing validation. That shift didn't happen overnight. It came from experience. You realized that the people who truly supported you never needed long explanations, and those who demanded them often never intended to understand you anyway. The investigation noticed this immediately. You were no longer trying to be understood. You weren't defending your choices or correcting people's assumptions. You simply acted. Your actions became consistent, and consistency spoke louder than any explanation ever could. That's when your growth became undeniable, not because you said it, but because it showed. They saw that you didn't argue anymore. Arguments used to drain your energy and pull you back into old cycles. Now you chose silence over debate. You understood that not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected, and not every opinion deserves your response. That restraint showed maturity, not weakness. They also noticed you stopped chasing closure. You didn't need final conversations or apologies to move forward. You accepted what was and focused on what was next. That ability to move on without emotional resolution surprised them, because most people stay stuck, waiting for answers. You chose progress instead. Internally, you upgraded. Your mindset shifted. Your priorities changed. You invested in yourself quietly. Your habits, your discipline, your peace. That inner work wasn't visible immediately, but it changed how you carried yourself. Your presence felt different. Calm replaced urgency. Certainty replaced doubt. What unsettled people was how natural this became for you. You didn't force growth. You embodied it. And when someone embodies growth, it exposes stagnation in others. People who relied on confusion, drama, or constant explanation to stay relevant suddenly had nothing to work with. You weren't feeding chaos anymore. The biggest shift wasn't external, it was energetic. You moved from needing to be understood to trusting yourself fully. You didn't need permission to grow. You didn't need witnesses. You became the proof. And that transformation is powerful, because when growth becomes embodied, it doesn't argue, it advances. They realized you were never ordinary. In the end, the conclusion they reached surprised them more than anything else. You were never ordinary. You were never meant to blend in or live a small, predictable life. Everything they saw in your journey pointed to that truth. The delays you faced weren't accidents. The isolation you experienced wasn't abandonment. And the strength you developed wasn't normal. It was built for something bigger. They noticed how your path looked different from others. While many people moved quickly, you were slowed down. While others stayed surrounded by crowds, you often stood alone. At first, it seemed unfair. But over time, it became clear that your journey wasn't designed for speed or comfort. It was designed for depth. You were being shaped carefully, not rushed forward unprepared. Your isolation revealed something important. You learned how to rely on yourself without becoming self-centered. You learned how to trust guidance without needing constant reassurance. Time alone taught you clarity, self-awareness, and emotional strength. Most people avoid solitude because it forces them to face themselves. You didn't run from it, you grew through it. They also noticed your resilience. You didn't just recover from difficult seasons, you changed because of them. You carried lessons forward instead of wounds. You didn't repeat the same cycles, you evolved. That ability to grow forward instead of staying stuck set you apart. Ordinary paths repeat. Yours transformed. What stood out most was your impact, even without trying. You didn't need attention to influence people. Your presence alone carried weight. Your calmness, your choices, and your boundaries spoke louder than any performance ever could. You weren't louder, you were deeper. And depth lasts longer than noise. That's when they realized something uncomfortable. The investigation wasn't revealing your weakness. It was exposing theirs. They expected to find control, leverage, or advantage. Instead, they found independence. You no longer needed their approval. You no longer fit into roles they understood. And that made you unpredictable in a way they couldn't manage. While they were busy watching you, measuring you, and trying to understand you, you were becoming someone beyond their reach. You outgrew explanations. You outgrew expectations. You outgrew limitations that once defined you. And once someone outgrows the systems meant to contain them, those systems lose power. In the end, the truth was undeniable. You weren't meant to be average. You were meant to walk a path that required patience, strength, and inner clarity. The journey wasn't easy because it wasn't ordinary. And now, as that realization settles in, one thing is clear. You are no longer someone they can control, understand, or stop.